socialism was. He never bothered to read what Lenin said, what Marx said, but he believed that to get something out of the Russians, you have to proclaim that you are a socialist, that you are a communist, and this is the only reasoning that the Russian power accepted.
In this hectic era, new government buildings were put up. Factories were built, producing products as diverse as tiles, processed fish, pasta, cigarettes and matches. The fertile fishing grounds were exploited for export. Traditional exports of Somali livestock went to the Arabian Gulf countries and the rest of Africa, in demand because they were disease-free and naturally produced. Tourism was encouraged along the second longest coast of Africa. Mogadishu had stunning hotels built and safari trips exploited the varied wildlife. Barre also refused to listen to experts who said that things could not be done. The fertile area between the Juba and the Shabelle rivers was being overrun by sand dunes. Undaunted, Barre created a task force of civil engineers and workers who, aided by volunteers on the weekly day off, Friday, stopped the dunes' advance by planting local cacti and shrubs. It was an unqualified success. Things were going very much Siad Barre's way. In 1974, he became chairman of the Organization of African Unity, hosting meetings of African heads of states. Having traditionally close ties with Arabia, it was no surprise when he took Somalia into the Arab League. Barre's prestige and international reputation soared. Even in the West, he was admired as a pragmatist, influenced by the Soviets, but not engulfed by them. The Soviets, though, were still anxious to consolidate their gains, and wary of ongoing Western construction projects, the Americans in Ethiopia and a growing Chinese influence signed a treaty of friendship and cooperation with Barre in 1974. Over the next 3 years, they sent an estimated $345 million in military support alone. The former colonialism was now replaced by a superpower domination. One of the biggest problems Somalia faced was education. Outside the main towns, only 5% were literate. Stories and facts had always passed verbally from generation to generation, the Somali language having no alphabet.
It took the force of a military government, of Siad Barre's regime, and this is one of his positive achievements, to settle this and make a decision. And the Roman alphabet was accepted. The Saudis didn't like it.
Barre's other great skill involved the coexistence of Islam and Italian-inspired Roman Catholicism within a supposedly atheist Marxist-Leninist state. Barre, a chain-smoking insomniac, was now running the government as a personal enterprise, and resentment was building up. However, with an economy relying for the most part on aid rather than adequate production, it began to founder. Corruption was rife. Tax avoidance a national sport. An unofficial clan-based cash economy bypassed the financial institutions, emptying the government's coffers. Now, with the country rallying behind him, Siad Barre had to look for more ambitious plans to foster his power gains and further attempt to go down in history as father of the Somali nation. One belief that would always unite the race. But the consequences of this invasion were a complete surprise to Barre. Despite being politically unsure of Barre, the Americans were acutely aware of the growing Soviet superiority in the region. The Soviets had built major military facilities in the Dalek Islands in the Red Sea, air and naval bases in Aden, and on the island of Socotra. The US therefore signed an agreement with Barre in August 1980, giving them unlimited access to airfields and docks in Berbera, Kismayo and Mogadishu, so countering Soviet power in the region. Meanwhile, the Saudis, the biggest importers of Somali livestock, had started their ranches in Australia. Exports plummeted. To atone, Saudi Arabia helped out with 2 years free oil. But there might have been an ulterior motive. Somalia was sitting on oil fields that would have been easier and cheaper to exploit than the Middle Eastern ones. The country momentarily appeared tranquil until Ethiopia's sudden revenge attacks were launched in 1982 and 83. Funded by Ethiopia, the Somali national movement based on the Isaac clan waged a guerrilla war in the north. Barre found himself fighting his own people. A complex character, Barre was also prepared to give people a second chance. He had released Aidid after 6 years' imprisonment. Resentment at his imprisonment reinforced Aidid's original dislike of Barre. A desire for revenge became increasingly apparent. An embattled army and an empty treasury forced Barre to sign a peace treaty with Ethiopia in April 1988. Deprived of its funding by the treaty, the SNL, overrunning Barao and occupying part of Hargeisa, launched a desperate attack on the north. Barre was furious and unleashed the full strength of his forces against the rebels. Mercenaries bombed the rebel cities, their own people. Artillery barrage, as many Somali pilots refused to kill their enemies, finished the job.
The SNM policy militarily seemed to me to be very misguided. They rushed straight into Hargeisa, occupied a part of the town and tried to hold it. The government troops there then simply shelled that part of the town and used their MiG and Hunter aircraft to bomb it. And I've been there since, and it is a most horrific sight. I mean, they've just destroyed that part of the town. Obviously, the government forces bear the main responsibility. They actually did the shelling and the bombing, but it was a very bad military move for the SNM to try and hold part of the town and conquer the rest of it. I mean, it would have been much more sensible to try and cut it off and to bring it down by siege rather than just seize the town by force. And of course, they were eventually forced to withdraw.